one quick question. First, thank you very much, for sharing. Always delightful presentation. The thing that inspired me is that, this kind of wonderful monitoring system might be useful, clinically in the situation of sudden infant death syndrome. They, if, put on a wearable so we can monitoring not just the skin conductance in the first, say, 20 weeks of life, and also the position of the infant, in particular more vulnerable when we can do some interventions.
That is a super idea, and I would love to talk with you about that afterwards. Actually, I've just been talking to some people about doing that. And the SIDS brain studies of the infants who've died from SIDS show patterns that look like there is an epileptic activity often in the hippocampus, or some of the similar kinds of damage. So there's a belief now that may be a very similar mechanism. So I'd love to follow up with you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So one question that came on one of the cards was, how soon do you think EDA will be used for clinical diagnosis in psychiatry? And maybe another sort of related question to that is, where do you see the tech heading in terms of applying these sorts of things? The way you have with seizure disorders, do you see there being some relatively near-term products that would help for psychiatry?
Sorry, several questions. So how soon? How soon questions are always a question of funding, right? Like if you get somebody who commits to funding it and making it happen, I think it could happen pretty fast. We've already got ways we know this data would be useful to help people have better conversations, for example, just from the start. Carl Marcy had done some pioneering work years ago just looking at synchronization of these signals between a therapist and a patient. And we've seen, even just in usability feedback, if we ask people about those moments with peak electrodermal responses, there's usually something they feel passionate about that they start talking about, that they usually start the conversation with, well, I wasn't going to tell you about that part, but, So we find it's definitely useful. Now, I think it needs to be in the hands of somebody who knows about it and doesn't wrongly interpret it. It's not the case that we can simply say a certain value means X. You really have to understand it in context, and you have to learn the many things, many-to-one mappings with a signal like that. And in all of our machine learning, we use it in conjunction with other things, the temperature, the activity, and other factors too. So I think it's already useful for people, but it definitely needs experts like the folks here to attach themselves to it and make sure people use it properly. The other question was about the suit-up? Yeah. E5, yeah, I can't say much about E5 right now, except that it's not coming out as soon as Empatica, I think, hope. They've gotten busy on some other things. But a good news is the Embrace data is super high quality, clinical quality data, and they are soon going to be releasing an interface, I think Justin's one of the early testers of it, that allows researchers to get access to this data, and this is a really comfortable form factor. And while this isn't advertised as giving heart rate and respiration, we have just published some results. My student, Javier Hernandez, has done some really beautiful work showing that when you are still, the accelerometers and the gyros in these devices and also in your smartphone can read your heart rate and respiration within half breath per minute, within a couple beats per minute, compared to gold standard FDA-cleared heart rate and respiration devices. So, in fact, if you want to try a cool demo, go on your smartphone to try.globalvitals.com, and you'll see Javier's free demo of that software working with your own phone using only its movement sensors to sense your heart rate. So we know we can get that data when you're still. So that's data you used to have to use an optical sensor to get. So that will soon be available to researchers before the E5 is. Mm-hmm. Question?
That was fabulous. Thank you so much. I wonder if your sensors have the sensitivity to petit mal seizures or spike wave discharges, because these are oftentimes associated with other conditions, and they happen during autism, especially during sleep.
Yeah, I've been learning these fascinating things. I'd say, so there have been some papers published on psychogenic non-epileptic seizures in our sensors, and for some patients they have a response, and for others they don't. And we've also seen some responses, see if I remember the numbers right, I think it was like 42 to 80-something% of complex partial seizures where there's no convulsion. I think they're now called focal, they've changed the names recently. I think it's focal something and focal impaired. I'm forgetting the name of it. But what used to be called a complex partial seizure typically has a big skin conductance response. It can have a heart rate response too. So we're looking at building a more we're very sensitive to those when they have that response. We don't know how specific it is right now, so we're getting more data on that. The focus first was on the most life-threatening generalized tonic-clonic seizures. There are absence seizures that we do not usually see a response to with the skin conductance. There are subclinical seizures where sometimes we will see huge responses in the skin conductance, and occasionally I remember seeing one patient with corpus callosum damage just having a whole series of these huge spikes with skin conductance. My gosh, it was like an alarm going off in this poor kid regularly. And some of them also got labeled as subclinical seizures by the EEG, and some of them didn't. So some of them are missing getting to the scalp, but we're still getting them here. I think of this as, we shouldn't think of it as equal to or a substitute for the EEG data. I think we should think of it as another part of the elephant. For those of you who've seen the drawings of the scientist and the elephant, and the EEG may be like his ear, and the ECG a leg, and this may be like the tail, and another piece may be like the trunk. It's a different piece of information that is triggered by brain activity, and it gives us, I think in many cases, new insights about what's going on. But we still have to do a lot of work to know how to be careful, how to interpret it.
Thank you.